Today I will teach you about the for loop in Python programming. So what is a loop in programming? So a loop in programming is a sequence of instructions that repeats until a certain condition is met. If suppose I want to print a statement like hello world for 1,000 times. So generally we do like print function, we do take print function and write in that hello world for 1,000 times, but that is a time wasting process. So why can't I just minimize my number of instructions by just not to write so many print statements for 1,000 times. So in order to work out with that, looping concept has been introduced where it is an iterative statement where it based on some condition it just goes on in a cyclic process to print or to evaluate some instructions. So instead of writing print for 1,000 times, we write a print for only one time, but that too in a loop. So loop is a cyclic process. So till the condition is failed, it is going to repeat that particular statements. Now coming to the for loop is an entry control loop because it checks the condition before entering the loop and then take decision accordingly. So if the condition is failed initially, then we need to stop our execution. If the condition is satisfied, then we can execute the statements. So here you need to understand the syntax. Now the syntax is like for is a keyword. Now this value is nothing but a variable in sequence. So sequence could be list. Now list is a collection of elements. It's a combination of dissimilar elements. Like you can put some strings, some characters, some floating point values, some integers. So it's a combination where you have a square bracket for the list representation. Similarly, we have a tuple as one more sequence. Here also, we do have a list of dissimilar elements, but the parentheses we are going to put such brackets. Here I have written bracket, that is a representation for the tuple, and we write open and closing brackets. Now the list is mutable data structure where you can add, remove some elements, but tuple is immutable, we cannot add and remove. Now string is a collection of characters. Now that has also been acting as a sequence. Now dictionary is one more sequence where you have the key and value pairs. So in this sequence place you can apply any one and you can work out. So we'll take one by one element from the sequence and put into this value, and we'll execute the particular statements till the end. Okay. Now for example, I have written something called Python and I have written language lang as a variable. So I want storing this Python into this, and I will use a for loop for keyword. Then I is nothing but this place value, in is a keyword, and language is a sequence. So here I taken word string. Okay, the string is stored and that is called a sequence. So here what happens is every single character is being retrieved and put into this I, and that value has been printed. So for the first time, this P is storing in I and printing that P. Second one, it is taking Y because everything is stored here, right? From here only, it will take one by one. So first time P is stored in I and print I, then Y is stored in I and print I, then T, then H, then O and N. So in sequence, one by one, it is going to print like in one row it will print P, second line it will print Y, then T, then H, O and N. So like this, you need to mention the sequence. So here if you can see, this language is a string sequence. Okay, so like that we have a list, tuple and dictionary also, so we can apply. Now coming to the flow chart of the for loop. Now here we have a start. Okay, that means we need to take the values from the sequence and put into some variable. And every item, whatever you have been retrieved, now, you need to cross verify that is the last item or not. If it is the last item, then you need to end the process. If it is not the last item, that means no, right? So you need to evaluate the statements and go back and pick up the second element. Then again you check if it is not the last element, again execute the statements, again go for third element. If it is not, again go for fourth element. Like this is a cyclic process. But if you find like that is the last element, then S means you need to terminate. See, for example, I have a start where I have put one list here. Can you see square brackets? 5 numbers I put like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And that everything is stored in numbers. Now this numbers is acting as a list variable. Now I'm taking num as a value. We write for val in sequence. So this num is acting as val. So I'm going to pick up this one first number 1 and put in num. So I'm saying that num becomes the first number in numbers list. So this numbers is a list. Num is nothing but a value. If you go back, you can see this val. No, this is called as, here I'm going to write num. If you see here, in place of I, I'm going to write num. Okay. So first, this I'm going to pick up 1 and put in num, and I'm going to check is the num value, whatever you have stored 1, no, is the last number or not. It is not the last number, it is the first number only, no. Then it gives the result as no. Then print that num value. That means you get print as 1 here. And again you go back, assign the next number as num. So this 2 will store in num, and again it will check if that particular 2 whatever you have written and stored in num is the last number or not. It's no. Again you print that 2 value. Again you go for the third element. Again you check that 3 is printed. Again you take fourth element. Again you check it's the last number or not. Then you print the 4. Again you take the last, that is a 5, and you found that uh, the number is the last number or not. Then you need to stop the execution, right? Okay, then I'll show you the demonstration of for loop in Jupyter Notebook. So we'll go to the Jupyter Notebook. So you need to open the Jupyter Notebook. So already opened here. Now, how to execute we'll see, and what is the output we'll check. So a for loop is used for iterating over a sequence. So the sequence could be what I said, a list, a tuple, it could be a dictionary, a set, or a string. Now all these are coming under a sequence. Okay. Now with the for loop, we can execute a set of statements once for each item in a list, tuple, set, etc. So whatever you're writing in the body of the particular loop will be executed for every iteration. Okay. So syntax is like for val in sequence, whatever showing in the PPT. Then run this code is nothing but the body of the for loop, what you want to execute. You can write one line or you can write n number of lines in a loop. But you can see here the for loop is terminated with a semicolon. When you put a semicolon, the indentation is going to start. You can see the gap. Okay, from here somewhere we are starting the actual code. Right. So whenever you put a colon, the indentation is going to start. You cannot start from below the F. If you write below the F, it leads to an error. Okay. Now, here the example is print each word in the list. So here I'm taking language as a list variable, and you can see the list data structure is nothing but a square brackets. Can you see here? Open and close. Now here, this is the first element I'm writing a string called Python. You put a comma, and second element programming, you put a comma, third element text, and fourth element book. So every element is segregated with a comma. So I have 4 strings here. You want, you can put numbers also, some floating point also, there is no issue. So this complete list is storing into this language. Now from this list variable, I need to pick up one by one element. So first I need to pick up this element and print, second this element, then third and fourth. So you can see for this x1 is just acting as a variable in this is a list variable, what you have stored, right? Now from this, again you can see one colon I put. When you put a colon, the indentation is started, and here we are not starting from the beginning. That is called, that space is indentation. Okay, now what you're trying to do here is to take this first element, which was stored into this, and you take that element and store into x1 and then print x1. That is the first iteration. Then second, you pick up this one and store in x1 to print. Then third one, you take this and store into this, and then fourth element, this one stored in x1 and print. So this, since this list is completely stored into this variable, I'm using that variable as a sequence here. Okay, after the sequence, I'm writing colon and then indentation starts. So if you execute this, you can see Python is there, programming text handbook. Now, suppose I want to add one more element here, like 10. That is a numerical number. And if I want, I can go for 2.4. Okay, so dissimilar elements I'm trying to put. Now, just that means there are total 6 elements now. Okay, I put a comma now. When you put number, when you put a floating point number or integer, you're not supposed to put in double quotes or single quotes. Okay, so just run this. I need to get all 6 elements here because all 6 elements have been stored in language, and one by one I'm going to pick up until the last element. So just execute. Now can you see a 10 and 2.4 is also been added. Okay, so here I'm writing only one line, and here I'm using this loop so that this loop is executing for 6 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 6 iterations are going on internally. Okay. Now, note the for loop does not require an indexing variable to set beforehand. So if you see some other programming languages like Java and C++, we use to write now I equal to 1 that and I less than. So you need not fix any sort of indexing variable beforehand. That means it is not mandatory like other programming languages. Okay. Now I'm going looping through a string. Now this one already I explained, but still we'll see the execution part. So loop through the letters in the word called Python. So Python is a sequence I'm taking. Directly I can write, or I can store in a variable and also write. So for the x1 is a temporary variable in Python. So what you are trying to do here is, this is a string, right? So string can be a sequence. So first I'm taking this p and store in x1 and print. Then y is stored in x1 and print. Then t is stored in x1 and print. Then h stored in x1 and print. Then o is stored in x1 and n is stored in x1 and print. So if I execute this one, so you can see Python. If I add, let's say I give the say space and add programming. So just click. So can you see Python? The space is also been counted. Then programming. So the space is also been stored into x1 and printed. So like that, one by one character is retrieved and stored in this x1, and that x1 is getting printed. Okay, in this way also we can work out through looping. So this is this complete double quotes, whatever you're putting is called as a string sequence. Now, can I apply break statement in a for loop? So with the break statement, we can stop the loop before it has looped through all the items. So before that means before all iterations are getting over, you want to stop based on some condition. You can do that particular break statement. If the condition is satisfied in between, the break is been applied and you are going to stop your execution and come out of the loop. Now, for example, see, exit the loop when x1 is matching with programming. Okay, now here I have taken a list with 4 elements. One is Python, programming, text, and book. That complete list I'm storing in this variable. Okay, so if you're storing a list into this variable, then that's called list variable. So for x1 in sequence called list variable, then put a colon, then the indentation starts. I'm printing that x1. Now, if the x1, whatever you have stored now, is equivalent to programming, then you need to break. You need to come out. See how it is going on is, so this is the first element. Complete string is first element. From this sequence, I'm going to put in x1. That x1 is getting printed. And x1 is holding what value? Python, no? So I'm checking immediately after printing. I'm checking Python, which is stored in x1, is equivalent to programming. No. Okay. Again, the second iteration starts like programming. See, already Python is printed here. Then second one from this variable, I'm putting in x1. That programming also got printed here. Fine. Okay, this is printed programming. But after printing, I'm trying to check programming which is stored in X1 is equivalent to programming is true. Whenever you get true value, then immediately the break is executed, and it will stop the execution, and it will not go for the third element, it will not go for the fourth element. So just execute this. You're getting these two. Now what I'll do is I'll better change this one to text, text. Now this third element I'm trying to. So here before checking the condition I'm printing, right? So your answer should be Python, programming, and text. Then it will come out. It will not print book. Okay, just check. Just execute this. Now can you see Python is printed, programming is printed, text is printed. Okay. So after printing only we are trying to check the condition. Okay, if suppose I go for next scenario. Exit the loop when X1 is programming, but this time the break comes before the print. So before printing the value, I need to apply break. So here you can see again the same list I'm taking with 4 elements, and you take the first element called Python from this and storing in X1. If X1 is equivalent to programming, no, because Python is not equivalent to programming. No, when you compare, then this break is ignored and you get X1 printed, that is Python is printed. Now second element we are going to store in X1. If programming is equivalent to programming, then before printing only I'm applying break. Okay, then what happens? This second element will not get printed. Try to understand. In this scenario, if you can see, first I'm printing, then only I'm testing the condition and applying break. But here what I'm doing, first I'm extending the element, then check the condition, then if it is equivalent, then break. Then only you're printing. So as of this application, what happens is the first one, Python is not matching with programming, then break is ignored and print X1, you get Python. But when you go for programming, that is stored in X1 and programming is equal to programming true, then immediately apply break. So the program is not getting printed, because once you apply break, it will come out of the loop completely. So execute this. I will change this one to text. So when I write text, this one and this one should be printed, and these two are not printed because text is matching here. No third element, it will break immediately and come out. Just we'll check whether two elements are getting. Now can you see Python and program you are getting? Okay, so in this way you can apply. Now we have a continuous statement. Now with the continuous statement, we can stop the current iteration of the loop and continue with the next iteration. So here in break, what happens if this condition is true, you are coming out of the loop. But when you go for continue, if the condition is true, it will skip that iteration and go to next element. It will not come out of the loop completely. It will skip that iteration and go to the next iteration and do the task. So here you can see do not print program. I don't want to print this programming. So what I need to do is, so same list variable I've taken with 4 elements, and I'm using the for loop for x1 in language. So you take first this one Python and put in x1. Python is equivalent to programming? No. So this get ignored and you get x1 printed. Fine. Okay. Now second element, programming from this variable is stored in x1. Programming is equivalent to programming? True. So whenever it is matching, you are applying continue. When you apply continue, this second iteration is getting skipped. Means what? This line will not get executed. Okay. This continue means the further lines will not be executed, but it goes to the third iteration. Okay. So third iteration, that is storing in x1. Text is equivalent to programming? No. Then this will be skipped and print will be. So can you see text here? Programming is not done, right? Then fourth one, book. The book is stored in x1. Book is equivalent to programming? No. So this line is skipped and you're going to get printed. So whenever the condition is matching, we apply continue. Continue means the further lines will not be executed, but it goes to the next iteration. So just execute and see. Can you see here? Python text and so. If suppose I don't want, I go apply for text here. Okay. Whenever this condition is matching, no, this should not be printed. So my expected outcome is Python, then programming, then book. Whenever I'm checking this condition is true, no, this need to apply continue. When I apply continue, it will go to the next iteration without printing that value. So just execute. Can you see? Python is printed, text program is printed, text is not printed because we have skipped right that. Whenever it is true, it is skipped and go to the next iteration. But in a break, it's not like that. It will just come out of the loop. Okay, it will not go for further iteration. It will not check at all. That's the difference between break and continue. Now, the other important function applied with the for loop is range function. Okay, to loop through a set of code a specified number of times, we use the range function. Now, the range function returns a sequence of numbers starting from 0 by default and increments by 1 by default and ends at a specified number. So here we are going to give a range, like how many iterations you want, or what is the starting value, what is the ending value, what should be the increment. Because when you go for a loop, no, for loop, generally 1 is the increment by default. So you don't want 1, you want to increase by 2. Then also you can do. Now how it is working, I will show. I have taken one example for x1 in range of 9. So this 9 is the ending index, but here I have not put any starting index. Okay, so my x1 is going to start with 0 index and the ending index is 9, but here 9 is not been printed. We are going to work with only n minus 1, that is 9 minus 1, 8. So when I'm writing only one number, that implies the ending index. So the starting index by default is what? 0. The starting index by default is 0. And it will increment by how much? 1 by default. And ends at what? At a specified number. Okay. And that number minus 1 actually. Now here you can see, starting with 0, no? That 0 is stored in x1 and print that 0. Then increment by what value by default? 1, no? So 0 will become 1. 1 is stored in x1 and print 1. Then 2 is printed. Then 3 is printed. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9 is not get printed. So 9 minus 1. Concept unit apply. So 0 to 8 only you are going to get. So just execute and see. Going to get 8. Suppose if I write 19. So my expected outcome is what? 0 to 18 only. Can you say 0 to 18 only? The last is not been fixed. So as per the previous example, I just make it as 9. You can give any range. It's up to you. Note that range of 9 is not the values of 0 to 9, but the values 0 to 8 only. Can you see the last one? Okay. Now, the range function defaults to 0 as a starting value. However, it is possible to specify the starting value by adding a parameter range 2, 9. If you write 2, 9 like this, this 2 is becoming a starting index, 9 is become the ending index. So when you provide two numbers or two parameters for range function, so first one will become the starting index, the second one will become ending index, which means values from 2 to 9 but not including 9. Can you see? The last one will become n minus 1. So for example, you can see here for x in range of 2, 9. So I don't want to start with 0. Here I put start with 0 now because I have not given anything. Starting index, it is starting with 0. But here I am giving starting index as 2. And ending index is 9 means 9 minus 1, 8 till 8 only it will take. So now this 2 is getting stored in x and print that x. Then increment by default is 1 only, right? So it becomes 3. 3 is stored in x and print. 4 is stored in x and print. 5, 6, 7, 8. So if when you go for 9, the condition get failed and you are going to come out. Okay. So just execute. It is started with 2. But here I have not given the starting index, so it started with 0. But n minus 1 till 8 only you are going to get. Now coming to the next example. The range function defaults to increment the sequence by 1. However, it is possible to specify the increment value by adding a third parameter. That means till now we have seen only 1 incrementation here. Now here there is a question like, can I go for increment by 2 or 3 or 4? That means more than 1. Yes. Now if you see this example here, 2 is the starting index, 20 is the ending index, that is 20 minus 1, 19 you are going to get. And every number, every iteration you need to increment only by 2, not by 1. So here I have written incrementation. So for x in range. So when you pass three parameters, so the first parameter is the starting number, this is the ending number, and 2 is nothing but incrementation. Okay, positive value when you write incrementation, negative value you write decrementation. Okay, so here what I'm trying to do, start with 2, every iteration increment by 2, like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, like that, till 20. 20 means till 19 you're going to get, or below that, based on the incrementation of 2, not 1. So first this 2 is stored in x and print, then increment by 2. So 2 plus 2, 4. 4 is stored in x and print, 4. 4 plus again 2. 6 is stored in x and print. Then again 6 plus 2, 8 is stored and print. So like that every time 2 incrementation. So just run it. Can you see 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 and 18. If suppose I make it as 3. So 2 plus 3, 5, 5 plus 3, 8, 8 plus 3, 11, like that you are going to incrementation. Okay. Now, can we do decrementation? Okay. So how to do that? So here for x in range, now you put the starting index is the largest number, starting index. Ending index, I put the least number. 2, that means 20 to 2 I need. But every iteration, it need to decrease by 2. Decrementation. Okay. So first this 20 is stored in x and print 20 value. Can you see here? After printing that, 20 minus 2, 18. That 18 is stored in x and print. Can you see 18? Then 18 minus 2, 16. 16 minus 2, 14. 14 minus 2, 12. Then 8, 10, 8, 6 and 4. So like that. So beyond that we are not going to. So 2 is the last number, no? I can't put 2 here. Okay. So the last number is ignored. Right. So if you put negative value, it goes for decrementation. If you give the positive value, it will go for the incrementation. Okay, for every iteration, there should be some increment. If you don't write anything, by default, only one will be considered. Okay, if you want, I will show here. So 2 to 19, you are going to get. So 2 to 19, you are going to get. Because one incrementation. But here I make it as 2 incrementation. So you can say 2, 4, 6, 8, 8, like this. So if you put decrementation, you go for if you go for negative, you go for decrementation. Okay. So starting index should be more, the ending index should be the less number, then go by the decrementation. It's up to you. If I put 3 also, no issues, you can get this much. 20 minus 3, 17, 14, like that. Now can I apply else in for loop? The else keyword in a for loop specifies a block of code to be executed when the loop is finished. That means after the complete loop is getting over, and after completing all the iterations in a loop, if I want to produce any message, okay, then I can go for the else part. So here you can say print all numbers from 0 to 9 and print a message when the loop has ended. So for x in range of 9, so here I'm giving only the ending index, like 0 to 8 it is going to print. So 0, 1, 2, 3, right? Already explained 0 in x and x is printed. Then 1 is stored and printed, 2, 3, 4 till 8 only. And after completing, whenever it is coming out of the for loop, then it goes to the else part and print like finished, finally finished. So just click this. Can you see? Just to provide the information that my work is over. That sort of things we can go for the else part, right? Now, the else block will not be executed if the loop is stopped by a break statement. Now for here you can see, break the loop when x is 5 equal to 5 and see what happens with the else part. So if this loop is executing perfectly, then only the else part will be getting executed. But here I'm applying something called break. So what I'm trying to do, I'm storing like 0, 1, 2, 3 till 8, right? Whenever the x is equivalent to 5, then immediately what you're trying to break. Whenever you're applying break and it is satisfied, no, this else part will be skipped. Can you see here? You're not getting any else part. See the nested loop. A nested loop is a loop inside another loop, or we can say loop inside a loop. So we have the inner loop and we have the outer loop. So the inner loop will be executed one time for each iteration of the outer loop. So first the outer loop iteration is going to check if it is correct. Say this one. Then we go for the inner loop. Okay, now this is part of inner loop. So all the statements get executed until the inner loop is been condition is failed. Then we go for the outer loop, that is second iteration will be going on. So first it will be executing, then if it is true, then you're going to enter into this one, and if this is all been true, then the statements get executed. All iterations need to get over of the inner loop. Then the next iteration starts of the outer loop. Then for second iteration, again we enter into this, and again the inner loop should be executed. That means for every outer iteration, that is for outer loop iteration, the inner loop need to complete its inner iteration, then only it need to go for the outer iteration again. Okay, so that is the reason the inner loop will be executed one time for each iteration of the outer loop. Suppose here we have 10 times iteration is going on, and internally some 5 times iteration is going for the inner loop. That means for every one iteration, 5 times this will get executed. For second iteration, again 5 times. For third iteration, again 5 times. It will be getting executed. Okay. Now these statements are for the outer loop. Okay, for this one. Now I take an example. So I'm having a list with 3 elements, x1, x2, and x3. I store in variable called a. I'm having one more list called y1. Here I'll make it as y2, y2, and y3 that I store in b. Now this a and b are acting as what list? So I put in sequence as a sequence. So for x in a, that means these 3 values. For y in b means these 3 values. So here I take this x1 and put into this. I enter into the inner loop. I take y1 and I put into this one. Then I'm printing the x is what? X1, and y is what? Y1. Okay, so that you get output like this. First one, only first one. Okay, just I'll execute and show. Now, okay, first iteration will be x value is x1 and y value is y1. Fine. Now we are not going back to x. Only y's get incremented. So I go for this one, y2. Still x is remaining same only, x1. So I go for x and y means you get x is x1, y is y2. Again, y is should be incremented, x is remains same because one more element is there, y3. Okay, that y3 is stored in y, but x is still holding x1 only. So you get what output? X1 and y3. Now these 3 are over. Now there are no further elements in b. Okay, this complete thing is over. Then what happens is a should get incremented now. That means a will become what now? X2. So that x2 is stored in x, but here y again starts from y1 only because b is holding 3 elements. For second iteration, again we need to start with y1. So again from b y1 is taken, but here x is becoming what? X2, no, this time x2, but y has become what now? Y1. So x2 y1. Okay, so can you see here x2 y1 you got? Then from b second element I need to take, but x is remaining same. So x2 y2 you are going to get. Can you see x2 y2? Then x2 remains same, y3 is going to store in this y. So now x2 y3. Can you see these 3 elements for the second iteration? Similarly, because no more elements are there, now x is becoming x3 now. So x3 with y1, x3 y2, and x3 with y3. So for every iteration, the inner loop need to be get executed first. Okay, like for x1 we can see y1, y2, y3 is executed, 3 iterations of y. For x2 also 3 times it get executed, for x3 also 3 times it got executed. So like that we go for nested for loop. So this is inner loop, this is outer loop. If this condition is failed, then only we go for the next iteration. Okay, and you can see when I keep a colon for the outer loop, there is some indentation started. When I keep again inner loop also colon, there is indentation. That means this print is inside this one. This one is inside this one. That's the meaning. Now we have one more statement called pass. Now for loops cannot be empty. That means that means we need to write the body of the for loop. If suppose you don't write and you don't have the content to write, then what? See, for loops cannot be empty. But if you, for some reason, have a for loop with no content, put in the pass statement to avoid getting an error. Now here, I put a pass statement. See, this is a complete list with 5 elements. You can write directly like this also. Square brackets, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 elements I'm taking, 0 to 4. Now this 0 first element is going to store in X. But here I don't have any content to print. Okay, so I'm writing what? To avoid the error, I'm writing a keyword called pass. And here you need to put a colon, that is mandatory. Then this is the indentation for that. Just execute and see, no operation is done. If suppose I remove this one, that means there is no content in the for loop. Just execute. Incomplete input, you are getting the output. Suppose you don't leave empty, just put a pass statement, then execute. So it is avoiding the error now like this. Okay. Later on you can fill up whenever you have the content. Okay. So in order to avoid the error, we can go for the pass statement. So compulsorily body need to be there. But if you don't know what to write, later on you want to fill up that, you can put a pass statement. Okay, but don't leave empty. If it is empty, then you get an error. So these are the concepts of for loop. Okay, where we have covered for loop basics, then range function, then break statement using inside the for loop, continuous statement using the for loop, nested loops, pass statement. So I hope I have given some input on the for loop in Python and also how to demonstrate in Jupyter Notebook. So if you like this video, do comment, subscribe and share it with your friends. Thank you.